Something in the basement. It was an old house, nestled at the edge of a forgotten town in the northeastern United States. Time had worn it down, the once proud home now sagging under the weight of its years. The roof, covered in moss, whispered in the wind, while the windows, half broken and clouded, seemed to hold the weight of 1,000 untold secrets. But it was the basement, more than any other part of the house, that attracted most of the rumors. Neighbors spoke of it in hushed tones, casting nervous glances whenever they passed the house. They whispered about the man who had lived there long ago, a recluse who had vanished without a trace, leaving only the house behind. They said the basement was where he had spent most of his time. Some even claimed that the house was cursed, that something had been trapped there. No one dared to venture inside. But when Alice decided to move in, she had no idea about the rumors. She was young, eager to start over after a painful breakup, and the house seemed like the perfect place for a fresh start. It was cheap, secluded, and in a town that felt like it was just a step away from being swallowed by time itself. Alice had always liked the quiet, and here, in the shadows of the decaying house, she could find peace. On the first night, after unpacking the last of her boxes, she went downstairs to explore the basement. The door was locked, something that seemed strangely out of place in such a neglected house. The lock was rusted, but still functional, and when she finally pried it open, the stale air hit her like a wall. She stood there for a moment, just listening. There was an odd, low hum, almost like a vibration in the walls. It made her skin crawl, but she shrugged it off as a trick of the house settling. The basement was dimly lit, the only light coming from a single bulb dangling from the ceiling, casting long shadows across the walls. Old furniture was scattered around the space. Broken chairs, boxes of forgotten belongings, and a large, old-fashioned furnace that creaked like it was still alive. But it was the far corner of the basement that drew her attention. There was something strange there. It was a door. Unlike the others in the house, it looked too new, too solid, almost as if it didn't belong. And the noise seemed to be coming from beyond it, a soft, rhythmic scratching, like something trying to break through. Curiosity gnawed at her. She approached the door cautiously, her hand hovering over the doorknob. But before she could touch it, the scratching stopped. Alice's heart skipped a beat. She could hear her own breathing in the heavy silence. The floor creaked behind her. Spinning around, she saw nothing, just the dimly lit basement stretching out into the shadows. Still, something was wrong. She could feel it now, deep in her bones. The air was too still, too thick. She backed away from the door slowly, her eyes never leaving it. The scratching noise had returned, louder now, frantic, like something was trying to claw its way out. Alice's pulse raced, and her instincts screamed at her to run, but she couldn't move. She felt rooted to the spot, as if the house itself was holding her in place. Suddenly, the light flickered, and in the moment of darkness she heard a whisper. A voice. It was faint at first, then clearer, and as it grew louder, she recognized it for what it was, a plea. "Help me, please!" Alice gasped, taking a step back. She turned to flee, but before she could make it to the stairs, the door burst open with a deafening bang. Out of the darkness came a figure, pale and gaunt, with skin stretched too tightly over its bones. Its eyes were black, hollow pits that seemed to swallow all the light around it. It moved toward her with unnatural speed, dragging its feet across the floor, leaving a trail of black ooze in its wake. Alice screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the thick, oppressive air. She stumbled backward, but her foot caught on something, sending her crashing to the floor. The figure loomed above her, and in the stillness of the basement, its raspy breath was the only sound she could hear. Then it spoke. "You shouldn't have come." Alice scrambled to her feet, her body trembling with fear. She didn't know how, but she knew one thing: she had to get out of there. As she bolted up the stairs, the figure's voice followed her, growing fainter with each step. "You can never leave." When she reached the top, the door slammed shut behind her. She didn't stop to look back, didn't even think about the house, only the sudden overwhelming need to get out of the basement. But when she turned to the door at the top of the stairs, she saw something she couldn't explain. The door, which had been wide open when she entered, was now locked. She slammed her shoulder into it, but it wouldn't budge. The whisper started again. And then, from behind her, she heard the faintest of footsteps. Alice pounded on the door with all her strength, but it refused to budge. The whispering behind her grew louder, the footsteps closer. She could feel the presence closing in, a cold, oppressive weight pressing down on her chest. Her heart hammered in her throat, but her mind was clouded with a singular thought: escape. She had to escape. Frantic, she scanned the small room for something, anything, that could help her. Her eyes darted around, desperate for a solution, but all she saw was the dimly lit basement, now feeling like a tomb. The walls seemed to close in, the air growing thick with something that was not entirely air. The scratching noises from behind the locked door were maddening, clawing at her sanity. Her eyes locked onto the window, a small, grimy pane near the top of the wall. It wasn't much, but it was her only chance. She rushed toward it, stumbling over broken furniture, her fingers fumbling in the dark as she tried to pry it open. It didn't budge at first. Panic flooded her, and she pushed harder, feeling the window frame crack beneath her hands. Then, with a violent jerk, it gave way. She didn't hesitate. Without thinking, Alice climbed through the window, wincing as shards of glass scraped her arms. She was outside, breathless, but she didn't stop. She ran, her footsteps echoing through the yard as she stumbled over the uneven ground. She didn't look back, not once, until she reached the edge of the woods. Only then did she dare to pause, gasping for air. The forest was silent, the trees standing like watchful sentinels around her. She was free, or so she thought. Her mind, still reeling from what she had witnessed, refused to settle. The image of the figure in the basement, its hollow eyes, its cold, inhuman voice, haunted her thoughts. But then, just as her breath began to steady, she heard it. A faint whisper carried by the wind. "You're not free." Alice froze, her heart skipping a beat. She spun around, searching for the source of the voice, but the forest was still. There was nothing there. And yet, the whisper came again. Closer this time. "Come back. It's not over." Terrified, Alice turned and bolted deeper into the woods. The ground seemed to give way beneath her feet, branches clawing at her skin, but she pushed forward, driven by sheer fear. She didn't know where she was running, only that she had to get away from whatever had been in that house. But the farther she ran, the more the world around her seemed to warp, like the trees themselves were shifting, bending, trapping her in an endless maze. Every path she took led back to the house. She could feel it, the pull of the basement, drawing her back. Then, she heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps. She wasn't alone. Turning frantically, she saw the figure emerging from the shadows between the trees. Its eyes, still black and hollow, gleamed in the dim light, its gaunt body moving with an unnatural fluidity. It spoke again, its voice sending a shiver down Alice's spine. "You can't escape what's been awakened." The ground beneath her feet seemed to tremble, and for the first time, Alice realized that the forest wasn't just a forest. The trees were twisted, like they had been bent by some unseen force, their branches reaching out toward her. The whispers grew louder, a chorus of voices filling her ears. They spoke in a language she couldn't understand, but the meaning was clear. The house had never been abandoned. It had been waiting for her. The figure drew closer, and Alice backed away, her mind racing. She had to find a way to stop this, whatever this was. She had to understand. A memory flashed in her mind, something from the house's history that she had dismissed as an old local legend. The man who had once lived there had been an occultist, obsessed with the idea of summoning spirits from beyond. The basement had been his workroom, the place where he had experimented with forbidden rituals. But something had gone wrong. They said he had tried to bind a spirit to the house, trapping it there forever. But perhaps, in his desperation, he had failed. The thing in the basement wasn't a spirit, it was something far worse, something that had been waiting for the right moment to break free. Alice's heart pounded as she realized the truth. She had released it. "Please, just leave me alone," she screamed, her voice hoarse with fear. The figure stopped, its hollow eyes fixed on her, as if it were considering her words. Then, in a voice that chilled her to the core, it spoke again. "You are the key. You opened the door. Now you must close it." Before she could react, the ground beneath her feet gave way. The trees around her twisted violently, their branches snapping and recoiling like serpents. Alice screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the growing darkness that enveloped her. When she opened her eyes again, she was back at the house. The basement door was wide open, the house standing silent and still. But the whispers were louder now. They filled the air, crawling into her mind, drowning out all thought. She was no longer sure where reality ended and the nightmare began. And then, she heard the voice again. "Welcome home, Alice." Thank you for watching, but beware, some stories never truly end.